It's so great to see so many faces in this room, and I know that the security process downstairs was long, so thank you for waiting. And there's probably going to be a couple more people coming, so if there are seats that are sort of in the middle of the rows, if you guys could scoot in so we can get some aisle seats for everyone. Wonderful, thank you so much. My name is Karen Halpenny, and I am the VP of Women in Children's Media. I also work here at Sesame Workshop as a children's book editor. We have had a really wonderful relationship with the Joan Ganz Cooney Center. WiCM held an event with them a couple of years ago, and it began just a really great partnership, taking the research that they do that really can inform content and making sure we put it together with you guys, the content producers. So it's really great and symbiotic, and we're very excited to be in this space here at Sesame Workshop. This is a brand new space for us. This floor was just finished probably about a month ago, so this is really the first time we're having an outside group in it. We're really excited. The technology is great, the setup is great. It's a beautiful space. We're very excited. I'd like to give a shout out to Mel Ming, our CEO, who is here with us today. Mel, did you want to say something?
Welcome
to the workshop. Welcome to the new workshop. I'm just going to run through our panelists real quick. So sitting next to me is Shelly Pasnick, who is the director of the Center for Children and Technology, which is part of the Education Development Center here in the city. Next to her is Mindy Brooks, who is Director of Education and Research here at the workshop. Next to her is Erica Branch-Ridley, who is Assistant VP of Platform Innovations, Sesame Workshop, and she also worked on the as a supervising producer on the electric company. Next to her is Heather Tilert, who is not only the membership chair at Women in Children's Media, but also a children's media development specialist and creative producer. And down at the very end is Sarah Wallendjack, WiCM's president, as well as a producer at Out of the Blue, working on Super Y and Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. Very exciting. And she's going to help moderate our panel today.
So what I thought we would do is just start off with some brief introductions and have the panelists share some information on co-viewing projects that they have worked on, co-viewing goals that they've had, or even a co-viewing anecdote. And for me, as a children's television producer, my interest in working in children's television probably started, watching Sesame Street alongside my mom. And the Muppets as well, and having like really fond memories of this was our family time and this is what we shared, and that resonated with me and kind of launched me into my career of hoping to offer those kinds of experiences to young viewers today. So that's kind of where it all started for me, and I think probably the biggest challenge, I specifically work in preschool television production. And although it's our hope that children are sitting in an environment with an adult watching, we have no control over that, and I think children are most likely watching our programs alone. And most of the programs that I've worked on are meant for the child alone, versus a Sesame Street where you have content that appeals to both generations, that watching a celebrity is appealing for the adult, whereas there's a lot of rich content for the child. So the programs that I've worked on specifically don't have intergenerational audiences that we're trying to reach. We really specifically focus on the preschool audience. That being said, I'm here to learn more about how we can reach and encourage parents to be sharing those experiences. So why don't I toss it off to Heather, because you're closest. If you want to describe a project, introduce yourself and describe a project that has worked to aim on co-viewing.
Sure. So my name is Heather Tilert. I also, like Sarah, have spent most of my career working in preschool children's television, so that's really kind of the lens from which I'm going to be talking today. Most of my career has been at a company called Little Airplane Productions, where I was a producer of a show called The Wonder Pets that we did for Nick Jr., and a show called Third and Bird that we did for the BBC, which is now airing on Disney Junior, or Disney here in the States. And I want to be very upfront about the fact that neither of those shows had JME or co-viewing as an outright goal from the start, or as a curricular point that we made in developing the show. But in both circumstances, it was something that we certainly strived for. You want to, like Sarah said, get the dialogue going between a kid and a parent. So there are a few things that we were really conscious of during production. So one thing was making sure that our writing was funny for our 3 to 5 year old audience, but also including jokes that wouldn't alienate the child, but that would make the parent laugh. Another thing that we did was spend a lot of time and effort and money, frankly, to ensure that the music was of the highest quality and caliber that it could possibly be, so that a 3-year-old would really enjoy this, but also their parents could recognize that we're referencing the Beatles, or little nuances that we built into the show. And lastly, we also would get celebrity voice over talent that, a 4-year-old doesn't care if Eartha Kitt is this cat's voice, but a parent might think it's really cool that Stella and Mira are back together as a team on this one episode. So I would say that was the extent of the full effort that we would put into ensuring a co-viewing experience happened. Erica.
Hi, I'm Erica Branch-Ridley. I've been at the workshop now almost 4 years. And I've been at the workshop almost 4 years now, and I started out as the supervising producer of Electric Company, but all things digital for the Electric Company, so the website and a few apps that we've made and a whiteboard game. And now we've started a new area at the workshop called the Content Innovation Lab, where we look at new technologies, new platforms, and how we can continue to distribute our content on all these new, different, wonderful platforms that are around, and even those that haven't been discovered yet. So just really doing research on what's coming next. The main thing that was in the report that that myself and Mindy, who I'm going to introduce in a second, are going to talk about is a game called Electric Racer. And in 2010, we got a grant from the Corporation of Public Broadcasting to do an intergenerational game. And it was for the 6 to 9-year-olds. So that was is the Electric Company age group. And with that age group, there's a little, I think that, well, we can talk about challenges yet, but anyway, I will talk about that later, challenges and everything. And Mindy's going to introduce herself. Mindy works in research. We partner together. I produce, and just like the workshop, on all of our projects, we work with education and research. And so Mindy is my partner in crime, and she's going to introduce herself, and then we're going to show you a little video, very short, on Electric Racer, so you kind of get the gist of what we did.
I'm Mindy Brooks. I'm the Director of Education and Research here at the workshop, and it wouldn't be fitting for me to be sitting up here without someone that is on the other side of the fence, which is production. And as many of you know, we are a reiterative process here, and we create something, we test it, we come back, we test it again, and you keep going back until we get the most refined product. So what we're going to talk about and share today is our process as we work together and with some of the other people on our team, and how it ended up in this end result.
Do you want to do the video now?
Yeah. Yes.
Three, two, one, go! If your child can't get enough of the Electric Company, check out the new Electric Racer video game that you can play too. The Electric Racer is your vehicle to drive home reading skills.
Pig!
In creating the educational goals for the TV show, we decided it was really important to focus on phonics. And so we decided to extend that goal and use it in the Electric Racer game.
Only work with the ink sound.
Okay, got it. Let's go.
Kids have to drive through different phonics goals while making sure to avoid the wrong ones.
Drinks.
What's that one? Did you hit that one?
Blinking. Yeah.
And their parent is sitting right there next to them, helping them, encouraging them, and the parent gets to play too.
Perfect.
And they have a lot of fun and they're learning at the same time.
Designed for 2 players, you and your child can navigate each course together.
There's green. Brown.
Oh no, not that word. Look out!
Deal. Oh no! Oh no! It's all right.
Unscramble the word, Mom. Yeah, unscramble the word so I can use speed boost.
Okay, get ready for it. Go!
Speed boost.
Woo!
Connect with your 6 to 9-year-old in a fun learning activity.
Great job, it was good. Video games grab his attention. And I really have fun playing together as a team while he works on his reading skills.
The Electric Racer reinforces what Maya learns in school, as well as on the Electric Company. And the best thing about it is we get to experience it all together.
Visit the Electric Company website to download the free Electric Racer video game. See you the power and plug it in.
Hi, I'm Shelly Pasnick, and I just think it's so swell that you're all here. Because how many of you are sitting here with wet feet? I mean, it's a pretty grim night. So I commend you for your dedication to come and hear about the work that we're all doing. So thank you for that. I am the director of the Center for Children and Technology, and I'm conducting an exercise right now, those who will be able to see me and those who will be able to hear me. And we do research that asks questions about how media and technology can support teaching and learning. And we, for a number of years, have been working with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, serving as their summative evaluation partner on the Ready to Learn initiative. And for those of you who've already looked at the report, you can read about the study that we conducted in 2009 that focused on literacy and what young children were learning when they experienced a rich media curriculum supplement, which is a convoluted way of saying a lot of activities that involve technology, some of it digital, and print materials and books and hands-on activities. And something that we heard earlier about the thoughtful use of joint media engagement, or how do you design for that? The way we do it, we pay teachers. Often when you're conducting a study, you want to preserve fidelity, and you want to make sure that the people who are meant to use the resources actually use them, and we also want to honor their time commitment. And so we don't do anything that doesn't have the expectation that kids will be working with the media together, or they'll have a caring adult working with them. And I'll leave it at that, because I know we're going to get into some of the thornier issues.
All right, let's dive right into those. Well, why don't you take this question? What are some of the largest challenges in trying to study joint media engagement situations? And I'd like the producers also to take that question in producing media that you're hoping is going to be viewed intergenerationally.
Yeah, so one of the biggest tensions, I think, in research is having to be narrowly focused. Research by its very nature requires a set of parameters, and that necessarily leaves out some of what's interesting. So we had a particular design in mind about what activities teachers would be using with their children. We gave them a sample schedule. We really didn't want to leave it up to chance. And what's really rich and fascinating, I think, is when you get into homes and you get into classrooms that really aren't following a prescription necessarily. We hear from producers that, of course, they would want their productions to be used in all sorts of different ways, but quite often it's used independently. So, what can you learn about what many people call the natural environment or the real environment, and how far we depart from that when we're thinking about research?
Go first. Okay. I started this before, but what I wanted to say about electric racer and the age group is that, these are not preschoolers, these are not 3-year-olds. These were for older kids, 6 to 9. So, designing something, the Wii game and other things that are physical, the parent is standing there and everybody's moving around. But when you have a parent sitting right next to you, the parent, I have twin 8-year-olds, so I know I do this all the time. I want to say, no, don't go that way. No, what's the brook? And I'm kind of saying that to them, and they're not 3 or 4 anymore, so they're saying, I got it, Ma. I know that one. I know now. So how do we make a game where the parent is having just as much fun and there's not a parent and child struggle? And also that usually if the child is focused on the game and the parent is focused on the child, then there's really no, we wanted the parents to also focus on the game. So we started out designing this game, and Mindy is going to talk a little bit about when we first took it to get tested.
We're going to show you an actual testing footage from our first gameplay experience. But just, I think something to think about for us was, how do we, when we go with our target population of low-income families, we want this to be applicable to everyone. And so we go in to this experience, and this is one of our challenges that we ended up walking out with. And so I'll speak to it.
Was we wanted a computer game, but we wanted the parent and the child to do two different things. So what was happening is the parent and the child would be the driver, and they're driving the car forward using the arrow keys. And the parent is using the mouse. And what the parent is doing is, as the child goes through a word that has the bruh sound, if it's brother, that's a long word, but anyway, if it's bread, I don't know, then the parent then gets the word and it's scrambled, and the parent has to unscramble that word. So, and then once they unscramble 3 words, the child can go faster. So it's all timed game. So what happens is the parent is doing their own thing, and so is the child, but in a sense, they're still working together.
So as you can tell, a major issue for us became an awareness that we obviously need role clarification in a very unique way, and particularly with families that don't have a lot of experience with technology. So for example, we were up in Buffalo testing, and this is going to be my mouse for a second, and some fathers that were in there literally picked up the mouse and was going like this at the TV. And it just kind of hit us like, oh, we've got to be very, very explicit. And not just in a really teachy, awkward way, but in a, how can we suck them in and let them know that this is a fun experience for both of them, and that together you can get more points, that you can have more fun, and also increase the learning. And obviously that's our main goal. So
two of the things that we did was, one thing, again, having the parent have a good time and the child, we added something called a speed boost. And that was the thing that happens once the parent unscrambles 3 words, and then the child gets a speed boost to go faster. Now what happens is, we wanted them to work together so that the child is calling out the word that he just drove into, so the parent is ready to unscramble it. And then when the 3rd word comes, the parent goes, okay, that's the 3rd word, get ready, it's going to go faster. So there would be some kind of engagement going on there. And then we wanted to create a tutorial in the very beginning of gameplay that stepped through the steps. And not only just said, this is what you do, parent, this is what you do, child, but also says, now try it. So what we did was, it was a tutorial that there were all these stops and starts where then the parent has to turn to try it, and the child has to turn to try it. So there's a practice session, so they both get to practice what they do.
So as with our process, we tested along the way, we tweaked game mechanics, and then we came back again about 4 or 5 months later, and we tested. And we'll show you another clip with this interaction. And these are definitely typical of every single experience, about 34 hours. So through the process, we kind of came around full circle. And even from that, we learned things like adding extra voiceovers and timeouts that helped, call attention to everything. But I think that was a good look at the process of how you can make a really solid joint media exercise.
And you didn't see a little bit in the beginning, but the mother still helped him. So when there were words that he was going to miss, she still kept her eye on the prize of helping the child learn, and still said, no, there goes a bruh. So she still was focused on helping the child, but at the same time, she was in her own lane, doing her thing, and then he was in his own lane. They both had a good time, but they were partners together to accomplish one goal, and that was to win.
Well, that was really entertaining, and brings me to my point, which is I think a challenge from a television standpoint is the dark side of the business. I hate to go there, which is the financing, really. So in order to pull off a study like that, I'm assuming there was a lot of, there's substantial financing to back it up. You guys were traveling to Buffalo and wherever else, and that requires paying the people who are performing the tests, the research directors, and also the test subjects. For those of you who have been involved in television production, you know it's hard enough to raise money to finance the show, developing the show and the production of the show, and then to think about adding on top of that a really robust experience that might exist either outside of the show or to add on to your budget research that would substantiate a really great, engaging, joint experience like this is, you know, it's a big consideration, and I think that's definitely a large challenge when you're thinking about developing a television show and the budget that's going to go along with it. How big is my research budget? This is going to be testing every episode for what exactly, how many research subjects is that? My research budget is growing and growing, and obviously if you set out the goal to have an engaging joint media experience like this, you really want to deliver on that goal. So I think that the financing is definitely a challenge, certainly not something that can't be overcome, but it's a challenge. And then the other one is something that Sarah hinted at a little bit earlier, which is, and I can't speak for every broadcaster, you know, I've worked directly with Nick Jr. and with the BBC, but we really need to think about, a child might be viewing the show by themselves, right? So we want to ensure that we put everything in the show that we can that's going to encourage a joint experience, that's going to encourage a co-viewing experience, an engaging dialogue between a kid and their caretaker. We need to be really careful to not introduce material that might be scary or isolating for a child that's watching something by themselves. So just for example, we had lengthy discussions about possibly doing an episode on homelessness, which was a really compelling topic for us, and we had a really fun and interesting way to get into it, but ultimately we wound up deciding with our research director that it just wasn't a great idea, because if there wasn't a caretaker or parent that could really engage a kid in discussion, it could be a really terrifying topic. So that's another challenge I think that we have, is how do we make things enticing and fun and engaging for the parent and kid, but how do we also make sure that we're really taking care of that child viewer first, and not isolating them or putting them in a scary situation.
So what advice do you have for people trying to reach a co-viewing audience? I'm going to toss that back out to anybody who has some advice.
I'll make suggestions, not from the television space, but just generally things that I think would be helpful. One is talk to the people that you want to reach. Do these studies. Have them play your game. Have them watch your show. Really see how are they engaging with an early version of whatever you've created. Talk to grandparents. How do they interact with their grandchildren? Talk to who you want to reach, and really, if you can find the funding to do it, do appropriate testing sessions, because you will always learn the most from the audience that you want to reach. Every time, the 4-year-old will tell you something new, a grandparent will tell you something you didn't think of. No matter how well you've covered your bases, the audience is always going to shed some new light for you. Another thing I would say is just check out the things that you really like and that you think worked really well and that you think failed, and figure out why did they fail or why did they work really well. There's one app that I think does an amazing job of creating a joint media experience, joint media exchange, which is called Toontastic, made by a company called Launchpad. And what they do is essentially you play on the iPad, you can create your own characters, and you walk through, you essentially get experience of how do you make a story, what is a climax, so all of these kind of vocabulary skills around the making of a story, and you get to actually do it together with someone. You can have 3 or 4 people creating a story and recording their voice and making characters move on the screen, and you create a little animated film that you can share, and it's a really cool experience. I think they do a great job, and it comes bundled with a little kind of guide for parents or caregivers to do before the experience if they want to. So find things like that you really like and figure out what it is that you like about them. And the last thing I would say, which is kind of off topic, and you guys can let me know if I'm way off topic or not, but think about play patterns. I think, one of my favorite things from, on Christmas morning, my nephew, I have a 4-year-old nephew, an 8-year-old nephew and a 10-year-old niece, and the 4-year-old was really frustrated playing Angry Birds, right? He had gotten to a certain level, and then he just couldn't kill these pigs. He was getting frustrated, more frustrated, and he called over his older brother, who then explained, let me watch you, let's talk through this. So they did. They also happened to get the Angry Birds tabletop game that they could set up, which turned into a little physics lesson with my husband and I and our 4-year-old nephew, which he then applied to the actual game. So obviously Angry Birds is a game, and that in itself is a play pattern, but when you're thinking about developing a television show, think about what play patterns are really embedded in the narrative and in the DNA of that show, and how is that going to translate to an experience that a kid can share with their peer or with their sibling, or that their parents can engage with them in later. So those are my 3 things.
I would say, I would piggyback on that a little bit, and I'd say think about the nature of the technology that you're designing for. That would be my main thing. If you're touch devices, particularly like iPods, iPads, they are kind of for one user in many, many ways. So it's definitely a challenge. It's definitely doable. There's good things out there. And I think you have to be very cognitive of what challenge you're up against, but also how do you make that experience so incredibly engaging that you want to pull someone in with you. And I think that's where it becomes really tricky, because as you can see, if you walk down the street and see kids with a touch device, I mean, they're on this. I mean, I'm like that on my iPhone. So, I mean, think about how do you pull in this other person to play with you, and how do you go about making that experience so enticing. So,
I would say we talked a lot about parents and kids, but also older siblings. You know, I bring back to myself, but I have a 13-year-old and I have these 2 twins that are younger, and you know, a lot of it is when she's showing them something, she's mentoring them. But if some of these educational games, if it's set up in a way that she's also helping them to sound out a word, you know, there's that intergen too of just an older sibling. So that would be something also to keep in mind. And I wanted to say, you touched on this, is talk to the experts, which are the kids, and which are the parents, but definitely the kids. Because here I sit and I do this, but I just had, I know I'm crazy, a sleepover for my twins, and I had 8 girls and 8 boys. Crazy, crazy. But everybody wanted to bring their DS, and I said, no DSs, we're going to be playing Jenga, we're going to be playing charades, and the whole thing. But everybody brought their DSs anyway, but nobody could take them out, nobody wanted to play Jenga, they were not having fun playing charades. Finally, me and my husband were like, just get the DSs. Well, what happened was the boys were all over here, the girls were over here. There was no, you know, which was kind of good, but there was no, I mean, they're years old. But then what happens is when the DSs came out, they all got together in about 3 different groups, and they were talking. They weren't even playing the game, because, you know, I thought, oh, they're just going to be all like this, and nobody's going to be talking to each other. But the opposite happened. They all got them out, and now everybody is they had a ball, and it was this DS. And I could sit back and eat pizza and watch. But the point is that I, even though I do this every single day, was just amazed at what happened when this piece of media came out, and they weren't thinking to themselves. They were talking to each other. They were sharing. They were like, oh, what about this? Look what I made. And it taught me a lot. And I say, you know, again, it's the experts. It's like the kids. And even if you have research budget or there's no budget there, just talk to the people in your lives that have kids. Just speak to any kid on the street. No, just speak to any kid and get the information until, of course, the funds come, but speak to the experts.
Difficult coming up with a new way to say the same thing, which is test your assumptions. I think certainly when there's intergenerational play, we carry forward all sorts of assumptions about our own personal experiences, what the experience of our families are, and we don't necessarily cross boundaries of generation, of culture, of just our personal experiences. And certainly if you want to create something that has a wide appeal, I think that's really important. Many people of means talk about their own assumptions as though they may be applicable to kids coming from traditionally underserved communities, and sometimes those assumptions just don't make the jump. The other is in thinking about schools and the educational appeal, if those of you are thinking about such things. Recognize that schools are fundamentally about group life. So even though there can be individual play, that so much of what the dynamic in educational settings, it has to do with relationships between and among kids and the adults in their lives. And so I think that creates different kinds of opportunities. And the third, which may seem counterintuitive, is how to mine the private speech of game players. So private speech is speech that doesn't have any communicative intent. And what is that, what can we learn about the self-talk that young children are doing with themselves and about what their experience is that may be a precursor to the experience that they may have working with others, whether it's peers or siblings or other family members. But that sort of private speech, so in that sense, it's not just having the conversation about the random child perhaps on the subway or any button you can encounter, but really listening to that way of talking that kids can have. I think there's a lot to be learned there about how they're relating to characters, how they're relating to narrative, and just the kind of experience that they may be having.
So I think a lot of people come to co-viewing with a lot of idealism and simultaneously a lot of skepticism of, is it really happening? Do you have any thoughts on that, for parents that are just simply not available to be there and engage in media? Does the electric racer work independently with a child or two children, and how are you addressing that?
I think that was one of the things we did think about, is that a couple of things. One is when we thought about the demographic too that we were trying to reach, we thought about maybe the connection speed wouldn't be as fast, or there could be some technology issues. So we actually developed the game in something called Unity, which is a downloadable engine. So it's 3D, but it's also downloadable, so that you don't have to wait for an internet connection. Just download it. You can play anytime. But we also thought about busy parents, and we wanted to make a game that was fast, simple, that if there was a little bit of time, the parent could play. That's why I think it's so important that the parent also has a good time, because those times could be short and precious. So how can we make it a lot of fun if you only have a short amount of time? So that was the other goal we had from the game.
Well, I'd like to now open it up to all of you. I'm hoping that some of you have some questions for the panel. We have some time for those. No?
So it was wet feet.
Yeah.
Yep. So when we're talking about kids that are underprivileged and that kind of thing, how do you bridge that technology gap? Because now I feel like it's pretty common, like a lot of people have televisions in their homes, like people look at you strange if you don't have a TV in your home. But that whole iPad and the Fire devices and all these things, while they're dropping down in price, and even computers still have a conceived high value to them. I'm wondering how you manage to get around that, and if that's something that you're thinking about in the future, how to get around.
I can probably speak. We want to create quality content on all platforms. So whether it's a web-based game, or whether it's downloadable, whether it's an iPad, whether it's an iPod Touch, whatever the app thing or whether it's our show, we want it to be where it's able to get to those that need it the most. Our hope is that when someone in that target population or in an at-risk area do receive our product, that is something that they can learn from. We can't guarantee that it's going to get to them, but what we can guarantee on our end is that we're putting all our effort and all our energy into creating something that is educational and quality and that is usable for all. And I think that's probably the major issue right now, is making sure that it translates to everyone.
Yeah.
Hi folks, I'm Michael Levine. I head up the Joan Ganz Cooney Center. I'm so delighted that so many of you could spend your time in the panelists. It was just awesome. In the interest of, I don't want this to seem like too much station identification, but I wondered whether or not we could speak a little bit about the design guide that's in the Coviewing report, and that might actually add an additional contribution to where the panelists, panel is. And Lori actually has a few slides that we'd just like to share with you that I think could stimulate more of the conversation about some of the great questions you raised, Sarah.
So these are the design principles that are listed. And I know that, just pulling from Shelley and Erica and Mindy's case studies, that's how we came up with any of these. So they're actually across a couple of slides. So maybe if you guys want to just take a look at these and do the other ones. Fit. And again, I think you guys really sort of addressed it in your answers, but if you want to speak more specifically to some of these things. So, sorry they're on two separate slides.
Yeah, I can jump in a bit. Just this last year, part of our Ready to Learn work, we were able to do a survey of preschools and early learning programs and how they're using technology and media. And we found by and large there's a readiness and an openness, but not necessarily the infrastructure yet, to your point. Although that's changing quickly in the personal lives of kids and teachers, but not necessarily in educational settings. But this notion of the previous and next, we have an echo of that in looking at the tried and true media as a bridge to the emerging media. So teachers not necessarily having a robust technology infrastructure in their classrooms, but they really adopted this whole bring your own device approach, which is the kind of the equivalent of the DIY in other fields. How can they bring a device? Maybe they've got an iPad at home, maybe they've got an Android smartphone, and they're bringing it in to do some experimentation. Or they're using these other technologies as bridges. So they have a record player, or they've got a cassette player, and those can be precursors to really experimenting with technology. And so helping adults think about what do you know and what's the next move, what's the pivot. So it's not necessarily leapfrogging to an interactive whiteboard, but it's really these incremental moves in order to do some experimenting.
Did you want to say anything?
And with the co-creation piece, we like to talk to teachers, and we like to talk to parents about what it is, what are their perceptions about their children's experiences, and we don't do that simply as an extraction. How can we take data, but instead get them co-designing the experiences and thinking about a sequence of activities, and they're very much feeding that process.
Can I ask you a question? I'm curious, for classrooms that don't have devices or technology, like you're saying, how do you feel, or have you been involved in any studies where a television show that is innately educational is translated into outreach kits or, suggested paper activities or things like that that really take the DNA of the show and the character that kids love and the way into the lessons, and use that as a bridge or a device in the classroom? Is that something that would work?
I think it's smart, and it honors what is already happening.
Yeah.
I think probably I'm going to just state the obvious, that no one in this room is necessarily thinking about a single product or a single media experience. Instead, it really is this ecology. And we think about how an experience is situated within a set of experiences. And so it's television, and then print, and then maybe, cutting out cards that they've made, a printable, or, crayons, and, so many different activities that kids don't stop and say, wait a minute, this is now my devoted screen time, and I don't want to, think about anything else, move the crayons away. It's a lot more organic than that. And so those are, those bridges are, I think, an excellent way to create a rich experience that has lots of repetition that certainly young children need, and lots of modalities that you're going to be hitting. By the way, the research that I mentioned, that survey is available from our website, and it describes a lot of what we found and a lot of the ways that educators are thinking about media and what might be next. So
What's your website address?
So that would be at cct.edc.org is the main site, and then /RTL is where you can find all things ready to learn.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so that's cct.edc.org/RTL. And if you didn't get it, just grab me right afterwards and I'll tell you.
I saw a hand over there.
Sorry, I'm all the way back here. I just had a question, especially, I know you guys were talking about testing this around low-income families and older kids. I was wondering if you had any problems that came up, whether in your research or in case studies, with games or with any sort of content dealing with Spanish language programming and parents who speak Spanish entirely. I say this particularly because I'm from a Hispanic family. And sort of dealing with that intergenerational, the parent speaks a different language, dealing with children who can switch easily between one language and another. I'm just wondering if there's anything you found or if it's an obstacle, if that's come up at all for any of you.
It's definitely an obstacle. Definitely an obstacle. I think a lot of our content, I know I have some colleagues from our outreach back there as well. We create things that are, both is bilingual, and we try to do that and specifically with games as well. And part of websites that for our outreach kits that go for that. But as you know, I think as with the challenge, it is also a lot of money to create content on both platforms. But it's something that we are constantly wanting to work on and improve and be innovative to address those issues.
With the electric company, specifically with phonics, because it was phonics, it was hard to do that, because that happens too. We get a lot of questions about that, but we just created a game called Prankster Planet. We're getting ready to do another version of it, and for the adult area, the parent progress track where they can see if how their child is learning, that's going to be all in Spanish also, because the point of Prankster, the curriculum is STEM. It's more science, technology, engineering, and math. So the phonics piece was a barrier for us this time around. And I think because there is so much ask out there from teachers that we're paying, that the CPP, that everybody's paying a little bit more attention so that we can hopefully get more money to do that.
Sarah, Out of the Blue is such an early pioneer in, multi-generational, co-viewing types of experiences. I wonder how many of the people in the room actually realize and understand how much of a breakthrough Blue's Clues was and the variety of other things that you've done following up. Maybe you'd want to share a little bit about that?
Well, I have never worked on Blue's Clues, but have been following Angela on Super Y and ever since. I'm not quite sure how to speak to it because, again, I see Blue's Clues and Super Y as being specifically for the child, and whereas the Wonder Pets would go for a joke that wouldn't alienate a child but appeal to an adult as well, our audience is the preschooler learning those developmental skills, and we're not shooting, we're not really reaching those other audiences. I think adults will watch, but I don't know that that's always the case. It's engaging in interactivity of peers together, but I'm not really sure.
That's joint media engagement.
Joint media engagement, yeah. But intergenerational, I wouldn't say that that this particular form of interactive television has really spoken to.
Speak a little bit. I got to tell you. So I worked on Blue's Clues. I did the Blue's Clues website and Dora website. So I worked with junior.com, and I was there at a time when we started making the parenting site just a huge site because of just that. Parents want to know how can I more engage. I sit there and I watch it with my child, but what else can I do? So that's where now Nick Jr. of course has a huge parenting area, but that's how it started. It started kind of with Blue's Clues, and parents were writing in like, what else can I do? I try to guess with Steve too, but what else can I do to help the learning for my child? So
One of the things you guys talked about for co-viewing, I think the traditional co-viewing you assume is going to be parent-child, but you guys brought up the idea of siblings, working with siblings and stuff. I wondered if you had done any research, if there's research out there, because that seems like a little more organic and less intentional than the parent-child co-viewing. So I'm just wondering if there's anything out there that talks about maybe even the difference between the two, or if, a sibling co-viewing, is there a bigger impact? Is there less of an impact? Is there anything out there about it? Lori?
So Reed Stevens, who is the co-author of the report with me, has done a lot of research around siblings playing video games together. So what he did was he set up like a camera that faces the kids in the living room. He just sort of set up his cameras, and the families got really used to the cameras just being set up in the living room. So kids would go, brother and sister would go and play video games. So he had a nice camera at the angle facing the kids, and then also what the kids were playing on the video games. So he has a really great article. So he's done research because, again, it is more natural. It's definitely a more natural thing. And here we are trying to design for parents and kids to learn together, like through Sesame Street. And Sesame Street itself is probably the best example, right? Because you're getting Jimmy Kimmel and Elmo together. You're appealing to the parent and the child at the same time. But that's harder to do with a medium like video games. But again, so siblings studying video games with siblings playing together. So if I can remember the references, read it's Stevens, etc. 2008, and there's a MacArthur article, and I wish I could give you the reference right now, but
we can send it along.
It's a really great
and we can put that link on our website as a follow up to this event.
Cool.
And there are others. Deb Linebarger has done some work in this area, but there's a way that you ask that question that I would caution you from doing. And so you said, like, is it better, or is there more learning, or is there more engagement? And I think that sort of construction where we try to privilege what's better, and it can get us into muddier waters. And I think part of what we're trying to promote is multiple relationships, social relationships and engagement. And so the research doesn't necessarily pit parent involvement versus sibling involvement versus being alone and that being the most miserable thing ever. That instead really trying to to promote lots of experiences.
I just finished working on an exhibit for the Children's Museum called Sleep Play, and the challenge there is the kids there are very young, but there's a message that was supposed to be for the caregivers as well, which had to do with health. So I'm just wondering, when you were doing Electric Racer, were you thinking about the content for the adults or just activities to engage the adults and keep them sort of moving along?
We were just thinking about the curriculum for the child and how to, because at the end of the day we wanted the child to really understand the phonics and be able to sound out the words and be able to follow all the different goals that we have for the electric company. And we knew that the parents would want the same for their child, but we were really focused on how can the parent have their own thing to do so that they also had a good time, so that it didn't feel for the 7-year-old like mom was just over their shoulder saying, no, that's not the way to go, no, that's not it. So how can we get her or him engaged as well so that they would have just as much fun as the child, but still feel like not only did they have fun together, but that their child was now reading better or pronouncing words better. So.
Is there any research, or have the Cooney Center done any research on, I would say television shows that might have an educational content but aren't specifically for kids? Like if a family's watching like the Planet Earth series or something like that together, is there any research on differences between not specifically adult programming, but something that's not geared specifically towards children versus something that's a children's program, but with adult content kind of thrown in?
Now, my candidate for that would be Mythbusters. But no, I mean, I think, this is something I pointed out, just what are the commercial considerations? And so it would fall to, a particular researcher's interest to really look at those programs that, cable programmers aren't having to demonstrate their worth or their merit by the educational outcomes of viewers. So the motivation is just not there. But I think anecdotally, the number of young people, because the generation who grew up with Mythbusters are now starting to enter college. So just how many people cite that as sparking their interest in science and engineering is pretty unbelievable.
I have a question about age differences. So I guess this is mostly for the electric racer folks. Most of the research done on Coviewing is mostly about younger kids, and it's also been shown that mostly parents of younger kids tend to Coview more. So what are there age differences in how kids and parents interact, or do parents act differently with slightly older kids, or kids interacting in a different way? Was there anything that you found that showed, a difference between the older age group and the preschool?
Well, we didn't test electric racer on the younger age group just because curricularly it was at a higher level. So I couldn't speak specifically to that. Shelley might be able to speak more in general between age differences. I think that parents probably support their child in particular ways based on where they are developmentally. But I don't,
Yeah, that's right.
it would be a very interesting, if you had something that was a game or something that spanned the age range, it'd be very interesting to look at the parent engagement and what that looks like differently, but unfortunately ours was early phonics skills, so.
And so much is at play, so the age of the child and what the expectations a parent may have about the child's ability, but then also how the parent sees their role. So for example, some of the research that's been done about parents and whether they see themselves as their child's first teacher. Some do, and then some come from communities where the teacher is the first teacher and the parent has a different role. Maybe it's the provider of rules, maybe it's the provider of meals. It's not any one thing, but how the adult embodies a certain role and relationship to the child. And again, that goes back to the kind of questioning our assumptions. And so it varies from, I think, family to family.
And I think it also varies based on the technology, if that makes sense. So, these parents came in there and we don't really play on the computer, and it just kind of this, and that's a generality, and it's not the case across all groups. But the same thing is in many of the focus groups and studies we've done, many of them, the parents will always underestimate their child's ability to maneuver or manipulate a device. So they'll say, so we'll test, we'll show the parent an app, and then we'll have a kid play on the other side of the room, and the parent, my child won't be able to do this, and the child's just over there swiping away, And I think that goes to show, and I would speak to earlier questions, is test your assumptions, and 2, test with kids, talk to kids, because you'll be shocked. So
I actually have a response to that too. We have 7 design principles, but there are actually 8 up until a couple weeks before we published or finalized the report. The 8th one was going to be collaborate, don't compete. So this design guide is really supposed to be focused on younger kids, so kids in the middle childhood age, preschool or 0 through 11. And based a lot on the electric racer stuff, we saw that, the parents and the kids are working together. And there has been research, developmental research that sort of documents that kids up to a certain age don't know what competition is. So like kids below the age of 8, they're not really competitive yet. They'd rather sort of work together with other people, and it's not until they get a little bit older that they want to compete. But
in the end, we ended up dropping that. The recommendation was have people collaborate, not compete, but then, but it just varies because Reed Stevens was like, well, no, because, he's seen kids who at that age are actually willing to compete. And there's also this gender thing where girls are less willing to do competitive games versus like cooperation games. So it almost made it, but there's that too, just the competition, which is, it's a big important game mechanic that we decided, all right, we can't agree on it, so we're just going to leave that out. But there's something there about development and competition versus collaboration.
The other thing with the electric company, the electric racer that we saw was for the kids who were a little bit more advanced in the competition, they wanted to be the mouse. They wanted to do the mouse and let the parent drive. So there was this other thing that I saw where the child would say, well, I can unscramble more words. So then they would switch. So the parent doesn't their only job is not the mouse. You could switch off. So there was that piece too, and the child got, because they're still learning, they had to unscramble the word. So there was that competitive piece too, other than the collaboration. So, and they had fun either way, depended on the relationship with the children.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Yeah.
So my question is sort of the opposite of the question that was asked earlier, which was I would sort of assume, and this could be wrong, that for the very preschool age kids, that parents are really driving the choice to co-view and to choose co-viewing or jamming opportunities. But for the older kids, like for the racer game audience, who's driving the choice to play that game together versus the game that the kid plays by themselves? Do you think that's driven by parents more, or do you think the kids are really embracing these opportunities?
I think the game was set up in such a way that you needed someone else. You don't have to have someone else to play, but it's much more fun if you have someone else to play, and you can kind of blame your things on them. No, not really, but it's set up in such a way that you want someone else to join in. So I think it added such a perk to it.
What we did, the promo that you saw, we put that together for PBS Parents, because we also wanted to say to parents, because I think parents are also looking for things also that they can play with their children. So we were saying, hey parents, here's something that you play with your child that's fun. And so parents would maybe go to their child and say, hey, you want to play this? It's a racing car game, which, what child is going to be like, oh no, I don't want to play racing cars. So, it kind of brought them into it too. And a lot of the feedback on PBS Parents were that parents were just grateful that this was there, that they can download, all the kind of things that we said. And also, for parents that didn't have, teachers even wrote in and said that they downloaded it on their computer and told the kids to tell their parents, or they put it in the library. We made sure the libraries do too, and so did teachers, so that parents that did not have computers at home maybe could play with their children. So I think, that was our goal, is that either way, both parties would be excited to play whichever one saw it first.
Great. Well, I want to thank the panelists for coming and sharing their thoughts on co-viewing. Again, I really, the Cooney Center does a fantastic job of not only, providing us with information that can help us do a better job, but they really make it practical and offer some fantastic insights and suggestions on how to apply their findings. So the report is very pretty. It's easily digestible. I highly recommend everybody download it and read more of the case studies I thought were particularly fascinating. So I'm just going to plug a couple women and children's media things for a moment. We will post on Twitter the website and links to the reports we talked about tonight. So if you're not following us at WiCM NYC, please do. I'm sure the Cooney Center would love to have you follow them as well. You get latest information about their new reports and information. And we also have some really fantastic events coming up in February. Kids Green will be in town, and we're going to have a happy hour at a bar called Faces and Names for anybody who'd like to come on by and say hello on Wednesday, February 8th. And then Nancy Cantor, who is running the new 24-hour Disney Junior channel, will be joining us for an evening, just talking about her life, her work, and answering questions from the group. So that'll be on Monday, February 13th. So stay tuned to our website. I think the information is on there now, but we'd love to see you all at a future event. And if you're not a member yet, please talk to us about becoming one. We'd love to have you at future events. So we're here. We have some refreshments in the back. Enjoy a cookie until we're asked to leave. But thank you again to Sesame Workshop for hosting